Hello, my name is Tony. Arguably, just about anything Hammer ever did could lay claim to being labelled a cult item at some point in time by someone or other. There are, however, a few standouts, and Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter is most definitely front and centre of the gang. It came at a time made in 72, released in 74, when Hammer were winding down yet still looking for an elusive life preserver or two to keep the studio afloat. They tried to bandwagon jump the martial arts craze of the early 70s, but mistimed it, opting to do so just as audience interest in the fad was waning. Idiots, you might think. Well, yeah, fair point. They brought in the TV production team of Brian Clemens and Albert Fennell, who had massive success with the Avengers, in an attempt at rejuvenating their output. Their first project for Hammer, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde in 1972, had been something of a hit, and led to developing Captain Kronos. The idea was to introduce an anti-heroic swashbuckling character, sort of Van Helsing with a military background and a sword, who would feature in a series of action horror films. A potential franchise, no less. Well, that didn't work out at all, because Captain Kronos bombed like a bomber bombing Dresden with an infinite supply of bombs on an endless bombing mission. It had a patchy release, little to zero publicity, ended up a support feature for some imported kung fu junk from Shaw Brothers, and failed to resonate with critics or audiences. Adding to its problems was the fact that the BBFC gave it a AA certificate, which made it suitable for viewing by 14-year-olds and up. Adult audiences at the time were far more interested in adult-themed shockers, awarded the For Adults Only X certificate. The teen demographic it could have appealed to as a result were equally disinterested, too busy wearing tank tops and flares, riding chopper bikes and sniffing Airfix glue from Golden Wonder crisp bags. Few went to see it, those who did didn't rate it, hardly anyone liked it. Apart from, yes, you've guessed it, me. I went to see it, I liked it, I was then thought a tasteless movie pariah, so fucking what? Now, decades down the line, as is the way of such things, reappraised with a Blu-ray release in 2018, it has been reconsidered as a cult classic. So who was right? Well, pilgrims, I think we know. I was spared the girl with a thunderbolt kick on first viewing because when it washed up at the Market Hall Cinema, it was the support feature for Hammer and Peter Cushing's last ever roundup of Frankenstein, the underrated Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. To me, it was one classy double bill with a lot of appeal, and I got a suitable kick out of watching both movies. Captain Kronos deserves attention for a number of reasons, not least of all because of Brian Clemens. It was his brainchild, he penned the screenplay, and it was the only directing gig of his career. He had a vision of the type of film he wanted to make, and despite his inexperience, insisted on directing. And Hammer, or Michael Carreras rather, who must have been seeing the writing on the wall by this stage, just let him get on with it. Whether or not Clemens realised his vision fully is difficult to say, but he did come up with an end product which added some unique twists to the established movie vampire mythology. He created a spirited and compelling spaghetti western folk horror hybrid, featuring an enigmatic and more complex hero than usual. If Hammer were aiming for change, Captain Kronos was certainly different from their standard fare. Just a pity that it turned out to be too little too late and failed to find the mass audience it deserved. So what do we got? In a rural backwater somewhere in Europe, or could be England, looks depressed enough, Dr. Marcus, John Carson, the village medic and community figurehead, enlists the help of old army comrade Captain Kronos when local girls are found assaulted and near to death. They are drained not of blood but of youth, expiring as ravaged old crones. Kronos, Horst Janssen, and his assistant, the hunchback Professor Gross, John Cater, arrive after picking up sultry gypsy maiden Carla, Caroline Munro, along the way. They find Carla imprisoned in stocks for dancing on the Sabbath. I have a feeling it's only a matter of time before the woke flakes bring this back for any and all imagined minor infractions or offences. Something else to look forward to. Kronos doesn't hold with this punishment and sets her free. Quite right too, because Caroline Munro is one of the hottest English women who ever lived. How hot? Hot enough to make me forget all about Linda Hayden, that's how hot. The arrival of Kronos and Gross seems to generate some concern for the local gentry, the Durwood family. Head of the family, Hagen, 9th Lord of Durwood and the greatest swordsman of his time, so it says on his monumental headstone, has been dead of the plague for 7 years. He is survived by an ancient, crumbly widow, an arrogant, sneery son, Paul, Shane Bryant, and daughter, Sarah, Lois Dane, who looks like the principal boy in a Peter Pan pantomime. There's a hint of incest about this pair, but it's only a mild suggestion and never conclusively expanded on. Neither are the subtle indicators that Sarah might be on a closeted journey to the Isle of Lesbos, but the few yearning looks she later throws Carla's way is a clue. Lady Durwood blames Dr. Marcus for the death of her husband because he stupidly left his plague-curing kit at home that day, so relations are not what you'd term cordial and warm, more lemon juice and frost. Yet it doesn't take a genius with a slide rule to figure out who is responsible for what here. Aristocratic family and big house lording it over a bunch of mentally challenged yokels, the daughters of whom are being picked off in a series of vampiric attacks. Wonder who could be in the frame for such devilry? Well, hard to say, Your Honour. Gross does a hunch, in more ways than one, that the attacks are perpetrated by a different kind of vampire, one that feeds on youth, draining the victims of life rather than blood. This is confirmed in a unique way. Gross buries dead toads in wooden boxes in the forest, because if a vampire passes in proximity to the interred amphibian, it will be returned to life. And so it is. Just a feeling I have, but I think Clemens made this bit of vampire lore up. Despite their efforts, the bodies continue to pile. One girl attacked and killed in a church. This vampire has no aversion to holy ground or crosses. Dr. Marcus pays a visit to the Durwood family home, receiving little welcome, and on his journey back loses both time and memory after seeing a hooded figure in his path. An agent of the Durwoods pays 3 local thugs led by the sadistic Kero, Ian Henry, to eliminate Kronos and Grost. In the coolest scene in the film, there is a tense yet blackly humorous barroom confrontation, ending with Kronos killing the 3 hired thugs in less than a heartbeat with a single sword slash across their throats, and resheathing his sword before they hit the ground. It's a glorious scene, smartly referencing the spaghetti western genre and the man with no name mythos, with both economy and style. Lovely stuff. Kronos, Grost and Marcus set a trap in the forest, but yet another young girl is inexplicably murdered. How did the perp elude them? The next morning, when Marcus is shaving, he sees in the mirror that his hair is no longer grey, he looks years younger, and he has grown fangs. Something's not quite right then. Marcus has been infected with vampirism and is the killer of the latest victim. He begs Kronos to destroy him, and he and Grost do try, but stakes and hanging don't work. They are about to try fire, as you do when all else fails, when Marcus, struggling against his bonds, jerks forward and inadvertently drives the large steel crucifix he routinely wears around his neck into his chest. He dies and reverts to his older self. Steel is the answer, Grost reasons. He's all about backing his hunches, this guy. They visit the cemetery to obtain a large steel cross. The locals, believing they are responsible for the death of Marcus, attack en masse, but Kronos takes them on and defeats them with his dazzling swordplay. Grost forges a sword from the cross, and the stage is set for a climactic showdown. Using Carla as bait to infiltrate the Durwood house, it is revealed that Lady Durwood is not a withered old hag in grieving after all, but the much younger and way more voluptuous Wanda Ventham, a woman with a heaving bosom and evil heart. She's also the mother of Benderbatch Cumberdick in the real world. Her screen kids here are dumbfounded. They didn't know a thing. Shocker. Her husband, Hagen, 9th Lord of Durwood and the greatest swordsman of his time, has been returned to life through vampiric means. The scene is set for a fight to the death between Kronos and Hagen. On guard. Who will prevail? Well, who do you think? Horst Janssen, a German actor, looks the part as Kronos, an agile, virile, blonde-haired, athletic type with a nice line in sardonic cool. Physically, he's almost perfect, but his acting radiates all the inherent charisma of a cinder block. His dialogue was dubbed in by someone else, and maybe that was a contributory factor. Guess he was used to it, though, having featured in several spaghetti westerns with luminaries like Franco Nero and Eli Wallach. Everyone else acquits themselves appropriately, and Caroline Munro, in her second and last Hammer film, looks transcendently stunning and resolutely sticks to her guns regarding doing nude scenes. She always refused. Here it's just the appearance of nudity we get. She claimed that even though Hammer were pressuring her to go full frontal, she resisted. Good for her, if not so good for me. Ah well. Kronos is an intriguing character, a decorated soldier who returned home from the war to his mother and sister to find them infected with vampirism. His sister bit his neck, but he did not fall prey to the disease and was left with no choice but to destroy his remaining family. He routinely has leeches applied to his back for some reason, and with a nod to counterculture, smokes dope, a Chinese herb, he explains, and indulges in rough sex, commented on by Carla but not graphically depicted. The score by Laurie Johnson suits the on-screen content well, complementing the low-key cinematography by Ian Wilson, which evokes a sparse and doom-laden atmosphere. The countryside around here is not exactly all bright and beautiful, bursting with bucolic splendour, but on sunlit occasions it does sparkle dreamily, and this is when most of the attacks take place. It's significant that much of the creepiness and horror plays out in daylight, because it's not an easy thing to pull off successfully in a horror film. A Clemens scripted serial killer flick, and soon The Darkness, used the same approach. That the vampires can walk in sunlight is another break with tradition. One that means no matter what time of day it is, no one is ever safe. Worthy of mention is the staging and filming of the climactic duel between Kronos and Hagen at the Durwood family manor house. It has been noted by others, namely the astute Paul Farrell of BloodyDisgusting.com, that the sequence is composed with objects in the foreground obscuring spaces and faces, as if the viewer is a partially hidden observer of the proceedings. Very effective technique. I wonder if this was Clement's idea or Wilson's. On the downside, Ian Hendry is not given enough screen time. You can never have too much Ian Hendry. Blood and gore is only spilled minimally. A touch more graphic content wouldn't have gone amiss. And Kronos is a bit too forgiving in sparing the lives of the mob for my liking. With a better lead actor where the acting stuff is concerned and some upgraded production values, the film and the projected series could have been real contenders. And maybe if Hammer had been a bit more wired into promoting the flick rather than behaving as if it were a lost cause even before it was released. As it was and is, we are left with one of the most individual and distinctive pieces Hammer ever churned out. And it did spawn 2 comic book incarnations published 40 years apart, the last in 2018, and a novelization by Guy Adams published in 2011. The Blu-ray is readily available and there is a full-length version on YouTube for the cheapskates. Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter is good fun. The twists on the vampire legend are engagingly integrated in the storyline. It benefits from well-choreographed sword fights, especially the climactic duel, modest set design and not unduly picturesque landscapes, which sets it apart from its Hammer Studios stablemates. In its day it flatlined both financially and in the popularity stakes, but that means little in retrospect. To me anyway. I often feel it beneficial to see in things the good things that others don't. Ultimately, it is a standalone cult classic that has evolved in status over time, one that demands some increased attention and hopefully valid appreciation by a new and differently informed audience. Rather than see it as a failed experiment, I prefer to think of it as ahead of its time, a brave attempt to pump some new blood into the genre, even if it was a transfusion that didn't take. Thank you for your time and attention. If you enjoyed this video in any way, do whatever you feel like doing next regarding liking, not liking, subscribing, commenting, or whatever takes your fancy, even if it's nothing at all. It's all good. Well, it's not, but hey, what can I do? Meanwhile, here's a song called Vampire Circus.
We thought we'd kill the demon, but he's been waiting in his castle to kill us.
Roll up your sleeves, we got work to do. A cloud is on the sun, and it's 2:30, sharpening the stakes for the evening crew. Who will get the breaks? Is it me or you? You've lost your way on the road to El Dorado, turning pale and grey, nothing but a shadow. In the light of day, something chills the marrow. When the light dies away and is gone, the vampire circus rolls on. Pick up the spade, there are graves today. A castle on the hill, and the moon is big. Absinthe burning deep, when you take a swig. Are we mice or men, or God's guinea pigs? When you've lost your way on the road to El Dorado, turning pale and grey, nothing but a shadow. In the light of day, something chills the marrow. When the light dies away and is gone, The vampire circus rolls on. Cold November mist slips through the fields and moving shells. Truth, if truth be told, is in a dangerous condition. Secrets in their caskets are the ones that never tell. Nothing keeps them hid as well as myth and superstition.
Isn't it wonderful? The sun!
One lust leads the other.
Lay down the law, there are lips to still. The power of the state spikes the ruler mill, endlessly corrupt to do as it will. Dolphins left to flog, and innocents to kill. When you've lost your way on the road to El Dorado, turning pale and grey, nothing but a shadow in the light of day. Something chills the marrow when the light dies away and is gone. The vampire circus rolls on. When the light dies away and is gone. The vampire circus rolls on. When the light dies away and is gone. The vampire circus rolls on.